authorization until it's determined that the threats to Israel have been removed. The U.S. is in charge of the Lebanon ceasefire implementation. It's unclear how long the IDF will maintain the outposts inside Lebanon. Before the pullout, the IDF carried out intensive activity, removing any last threats in areas up to 8 kilometers inside Lebanon. The army beefed up defenses on the Israeli side of the border ahead of tomorrow's ceasefire deadline. The ramped-up defenses include manned outposts in front of each Israeli community, better surveillance capabilities, and triple the number of troops compared to the start of the war. Israel has also made clear that the IDF will continue to operate north of the border to confront any and all threats to Israeli security. Under the U.S.-brokered ceasefire, IDF troops were given 60 days to withdraw from South Lebanon after occupying the territories in a ground operation back in early October. Hezbollah operatives must now be completely out of South Lebanon and north of the Litani River. The original deadline was extended from January 26th to February 18th. The Hezbollah chief demanded a full Israeli withdrawal, including the outposts, but he did not include a threat.
يجب أن تنسحب إسرائيل في 18 شباط بالكامل. ما إلى ذريعة، لا نقاط 5 ولا تفاصيل أخرى تحت أي ذريعة وتحت أي عنوان. هذا هو الاتفاق.
The IDF decided on Sunday to lift restrictions on residents returning to their homes in northern Israel starting March 1st. That's nearly a year and a half after they were evacuated due to Hezbollah attacks. Hezbollah attacks on Israel since October 2023 resulted in the deaths of 46 civilians. In addition, 80 IDF soldiers and reservists died in cross-border skirmishes, attacks on Israel, and in the ensuing ground operation in South Lebanon.
Well, and now joining us to discuss the security implications for northern Israel is Avram Levine, the media manager at Alma Research Center. Avram, thanks for joining us. Pleasure to have you on. I wanted to start on a personal level. I know that you yourself are a resident of northern Israel. How do you and the community feel about this withdrawal from Lebanon? Can residents of the north really safely return home?
Well, it's definitely much better than before. Hezbollah hasn't had any successful attacks. There's no sirens going off. We don't have to run into shelters. Kids are in school, so things are much better. The question is the threat still there? And I think people here are still very concerned with Hezbollah regaining its abilities, recovering, and still calling for the destruction of Israel, obviously, every opportunity they have. So the question is, are we counting on these other forces and agreements, or are we still relying on, do we have to rely on IDF? And I think the answer is obvious.
Now, speaking about the political implications of this move, has Hezbollah really been effectively deterred? I mean, what are the guarantees that we have that this won't spiral out of control again, especially given past experiences with UNIFIL, the Lebanese army, and of course, the intervention of the Islamic Republic of Iran in Lebanon?
Well, there are no, nothing will give us any guarantees. Nobody is giving us guarantees. What we're seeing here right now is another attempt to do again what we tried to do after the war in August 2006 and try to deploy the Lebanese armed forces with UNIFIL, 10,000 soldiers, and let them prevent and stop Hezbollah from redeploying in South Lebanon. I hope they do better this time. Currently, I've heard of another attack on UNIFIL forces. They have a highly ranked commander that was injured. I do not see any clashes between Hezbollah and Lebanese armed forces, but they are redeploying, which is a good thing. And I think when they finish, we'll have a better and clearer picture of what's going on forward in the near future.
You know, there was a report that President Trump has demanded that Hezbollah truly demilitarize at the instruction of the Lebanese army, and that if that does not happen, that he will then turn to the UN Security Council to enforce 1701 and 1559. Is this a potential long-term solution to the problem in Lebanon that wouldn't necessarily involve boots on the ground on the Israeli side, or is that not enforceable either?
Well, that's much closer to my wish list. than what we've ever heard here. Meaning the fact that Hezbollah, a terrorist organization supported by RIGC, another terrorist organization backed by Iran, is a part of the Lebanese government and part of the Lebanese army in that sense, and supported heavily by US, is a very weird situation. I'm happy we're now starting to pressure Lebanon into changing the situation altogether and eliminating that threat. I think Lebanon and Israel have a bright future if Hezbollah and Iran are not here.
I wanted to ask you, can you explain a little bit about the strategic outposts that the IDF is going to be holding on to? Why are they significant? And is that, combined with the, Mount Hermon in Syria, is that enough to ensure security for Israel on that border, for now at least?
Well, it gives us a much better starting point. There's 5 points that IDF chose. They're all high vantage points that give us 2 advantages. One is the ability to see and control areas in South Lebanon and prevent any surprises of Radwan attacks on our close border communities on the Israeli side. The other advantage is if IDF is there, Hezbollah is not there, meaning that place would be a very good place for Hezbollah to place their forces when they attack Israel with anti-tank missiles, with snipers, with ground attack style October 7th. So those 2 advantages are the ones that essentially require IDF from staying in those outposts for as long as it takes to prevent Hezbollah from being there.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but we'll continue to update our viewers on this story and the situation in Lebanon. Thank you so much for joining us, Avram Levine.
Thank you very much.
The Security Cabinet held lengthy discussions about Phase 2 of the hostage for ceasefire deal with Hamas. And earlier today, a deal was made to ensure the return of the 6 living hostages at the end of Phase 1. No final decisions or votes were taken on Phase 2, with arguments made to send a team to Doha or renew the war in Gaza. We have more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
For the first time, the Security Cabinet held discussions on the second phase of the hostage ceasefire deal with Hamas. No decisions were made and no votes were conducted. Under the terms of the ceasefire deal, mediation for the second phase were to begin 2 weeks ago, 16 days into the 42-day agreement. The Security Cabinet has yet to approve sending an Israeli team to Doha to take part in the mediation efforts. The cabinet meeting followed comments by President Trump envoy Steve Witkoff, who said there will absolutely be Phase 2, and we won't leave any hostages behind. The second phase of the deal includes an end to the war and a complete withdrawal of IDF troops in exchange for the return of all Israeli hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu continues to assert that he is committed to President Trump's plan to remove Gaza's population and rebuild the Strip under U.S. ownership. But some of Israel's strongest supporters in the Senate are pushing back against a U.S. takeover of Gaza.
No one expects Israel to do any kind of deal regarding Gaza or the West Bank that would lead to another October 7th. Nobody expects Israel to allow Hamas to stay in charge, and nobody believes that the PA is the right answer in this current construct. One thing I will say, there's very little appetite that I've seen in the United States Senate for America to take over Gaza in any way, shape, or form. I think that would be a difficult sell in South Carolina.
There is support for an emerging Gaza plan being prepared by Egypt.
My talks with King Abdullah convinced me that the plan that the Arab states will offer to President Trump provides a realistic prospect for normalizing relations, self-determination by the Palestinians, regional defense arrangements, and security for Israel. If those components are part of a realistic plan, it could be a game changer for the region.
Egypt is developing a plan to rebuild Gaza without forcing Palestinians out of the Strip. The proposal calls for establishing secure areas within the Gaza Strip where Palestinians can live initially, while Egyptian and international construction firms remove and rehabilitate the enclave's infrastructure.
Well, Israel is preparing for the bodies of 4 hostages to be returned on Thursday as part of the first phase of the ceasefire deal. This news as families receive more signs of life from hostages still in captivity. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian reports in southern Israel outside of Kibbutz Re'im.
We're standing in what is known as the shelter of death outside of Kibbutz Re'im, where so many people hid in the shelter trying to save themselves. Ended up Hamas terrorists, as you can see, shot so many bullet holes inside of here. One of those hostages, people that was actually taken from here, is hostage Elia Cohen, who is said to be released in phase 1 of this ceasefire deal. Recently, his family received a sign of life from him from hostages recently released. According to Israeli media reports, 27-year-old Elia Cohen passed a message through freed hostages to his mother that he does Kiddush before Shabbat and prays every morning. Reports say Cohen was held together at one point with released hostages Eli Sharabi and Or Levi, who was also kidnapped from the same bomb shelter. It also says Alon Ohel was also held with them and recently had a sign of life. More than 10 hostages still in Hamas captivity have had signs of life sent back to their families, giving them more hope as they fight for their releases. Israel now prepares to receive the bodies of 4 unknown hostages on Thursday. Israel will receive the names of the hostages Thursday morning and will bring them directly to Abu Kabir Forensics Institute for identification. Once there is positive ID, the families will then be notified. According to officials, the agreement with Hamas said the bodies of a number of hostages will be returned to Israel on the 33rd day of the ceasefire, which is Thursday. Israel is also pushing for Hamas to release 6 hostages on Saturday instead of the planned 3, according to an Israeli official cited in a report. In response, Israel will start allowing mobile homes and heavy construction equipment into Gaza. This push from the Israeli government comes as harrowing testimonies are told from released hostages and the dire conditions of those in captivity still. 14 Israeli hostages are still yet to come out of phase 1 of this deal. As we said earlier, it's unclear if 3 hostages or more than 3 hostages will be released on Saturday.
Following U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visit to Israel, he arrived in Saudi Arabia yesterday for a series of Saudi-hosted talks with Russian officials aimed at ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Rubio is, of course, also expected to be discussing the role of Saudi Arabia and the Middle East in the future of Gaza. Let's take a look at the latest developments. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is wasting no time in advancing President Trump's foreign policy agenda. After a short trip to Israel this week, the Secretary of State headed to Saudi Arabia to continue advancing a solution to the Gaza war. Today, Rubio met with Saudi leader Mohammed bin Salman to begin discussions with Russian officials, but also held a 3-hour meeting to discuss President Trump's proposal for the Gaza Strip to relocate Palestinians, something which Saudi Arabia has thus far firmly rejected. In the meeting, Mohammed bin Salman welcomed Rubio to Saudi Arabia and stated he looks forward to working with the Trump administration for the betterment of the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and many countries in the region. Since Trump's announcement, Saudi Arabia has been spearheading efforts for a counter-proposal in Gaza that are expected to include reconstruction of the Gaza Strip and removing Hamas from power. Both Egypt and Jordan have reportedly been working on formulating an alternative plan for the future of Gaza, something which the Trump administration has said they're open to hearing. Also on the American agenda is the pursuit of an Israeli-Saudi peace deal, one that until now the Saudis have insisted must include the pathway to a Palestinian state. During the meeting, Rubio was joined by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Middle East Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Rubio is expected to continue the Middle East diplomatic blitz in the UAE on Wednesday. Well, if you are looking to move to Israel, your dreams can now be realized with Sparta Real Estate, which is helping foreigners settle in the Holy Land. Let's take a quick look at what makes Sparta so unique.
For generations, owning a home in Eretz Yisrael has been a cherished dream, one of faith, heritage, and belonging. Now, with Sparta Real Estate, that dream is within reach. From the spiritual heart of Jerusalem to the vibrant Jewish life of Vernana, the seaside beauty of Netanya, or the energy of Tel Aviv, Eliyahu Kleinman will guide you every step of the way. With beautiful homes at various price points and all bureaucracy handled for you, it's never been easier. Scan the QR code now, and Eliyahu will personally help you find your home in Israel.
And here with us in the studio to discuss the current real estate climate in Israel is Eliyahu Kleinman. Thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here in the studio.
Thank you.
I wanted to start by asking you, obviously, it's a difficult time in Israel, but you have this passion for helping foreigners, new immigrants, find their homes in Israel. Where's it coming from?
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's a big pleasure to be here. My passion comes from my personal experience as someone that was born in Israel but raised in Sao Paulo, Brazil, South America. I definitely understand the challenges of the foreign buyer, the international buyer that wants to purchase this home in Israel. It's starting from the distance, the time difference, different cultures, different markets, and that's why we're here to help the clients to navigate in the market, to understand what do they want to get in this purchase, what is their purpose, and from there's where we come. In the last years, we helped hundreds of buyers to buy their homes in Israel, giving them a 360 service, full concierge services from the legal, mortgage, financial, architectural, and property management. That's what we're doing. No doubts that buying an apartment in Israel, it's more than just real estate. It's something with a lot of sentimental feelings. That's why we take it very personally. And if one of the clients will scan the QR code, I'll personally will contact him and will be in touch with him and will take him hand by hand throughout all this process.
Yeah, I think that the bureaucracy in Israel can be intimidating for a foreigner, so it's great to hear you have this 360-degree service that you're offering the clients. Now, where do you have homes in Israel?
So Sparta Group is active throughout all Israel. We have new developments that we're selling exclusively, if it's Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Modi'in, Ra'anana, Netanya, basically all over. The big advantage of Sparta that when a client comes to us, as I said before, first of all, we want to understand his needs. What does he want to fit the budget, to fit everything that he wants to have in the deal. And in the end, afterwards, to find the right place, it's the easiest part. But for us, it's to understand the client, because we believe in connecting people to properties and not properties to people.
Absolutely. Now, for those who are watching and thinking about perhaps buying a property in Israel, what are some of the hottest and most comfortable areas for new immigrants?
So no doubts, as I said, that to buy an apartment in Israel, it's a big Jewish dream for many, many years, many, many generations. But no doubts that today there are being upcoming many Anglo communities. If it's in, basically used to be Jerusalem, but not only Jerusalem. It can be in Ra'anana, it can be in Netanya, it can be Karmei Gat. In the end, what makes the difference is what's the status of the client, the buyer. If he's a retired, young family, someone who wants to be close to working in high tech. So it's really, depending on the needs of the buyer, then we can know how to connect him to the best community that will be the soft landing for him here in Israel.
Now, we are running out of time, so I need you to keep it short, but I do want to ask you, what are some of the latest trends that we've seen? Obviously, we're in a war, but are you still seeing a high demand for new properties in Israel, especially for foreigners?
Absolutely, yes. And I said we see Jewish people buying in Israel for many years, and no doubt that after October 7th, people understand that buying an apartment in Israel, it's more just a second home. It's a place for, I call it a secure land. If something happens, we see what's happening in the States, in Australia, throughout all over the world. We see many clients that are coming, as I said, Europe, Australia, South America, North America, and that's why we're here to help them.
All right. Well, we are out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us today. And of course, to all of our viewers, if you are interested in buying a property, feel free to scan the QR code, and Eliyahu here will reach out to you personally, as mentioned. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Israel and India are moving closer to a historic free trade deal, with talks set to conclude this year. Israel's largest ever business delegation to India marks a major step in strengthening economic ties. ILTV's Ariella Lachiani has more.
Israel and India are moving towards a historic free trade agreement, with the negotiations expected to conclude by the end of the year. The latest push comes as Israel sent its largest ever business delegation to India, marking a major step in strengthening economic ties. Over 100 Israeli companies spanning cybersecurity, smart agriculture, renewable energy, and AI participated in more than 600 business meetings with Indian counterparts. The goal: expanding Israeli exports, securing investments, and fostering bilateral trade. India's Commerce and Industry Minister highlighted the vast opportunities for collaboration and announced plans to lead a delegation of Indian executives to Israel next year to advance partnerships in key sectors. With bilateral trade already reaching $5 billion in 2024, both nations see immense potential for growth. Israel is India's fourth largest supplier of military hardware, and cooperation is expanding in water systems, healthcare, and solar energy. The momentum also aligns with US efforts to establish a new trade corridor linking India, Israel, and Europe. Officials say the free trade agreement will serve as a key pillar in this ambitious economic initiative. As both nations prepare for next year's business delegation to Israel, expectations are high that this partnership will shape the future of trade and innovation in the region.
And today we have the privilege of hearing once again from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. She shares with us a recap of some of the most important headlines from recent weeks. Let's take a look.
Shalom, my friends, from here in the Holy Land. I'm Yael Eckstein, and here are 3 things that you should know about Israel this week. Number 1, with some war updates. Israel received 3 more hostages home to the Holy Land and reunited with their families. These 3 men who were released look emaciated. They haven't been fed, they've been starved, they've been abused. And as the people of Israel watched these 3 men be freed from Hamas captivity, we realize the world has let them down. We continue to pray for the hostages who are still being held in the Gaza Strip, and we pray that we will bring them home soon. Number 2, in some positive updates, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just returned to Israel after spending a week in the USA. And what he said about his meetings is that Israel has never had a better friend than America. We are so happy that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had good meetings with President Trump, and we look forward to 4 years of strong friendship that will make us all safer for many years to come. And number 3, in some fellowship news, 98% of the residents of Sderot have returned to their city. Sderot was one of the cities on the border with the Gaza Strip that was invaded on October 7th, and now the citizens finally are able to go back and restart their life. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews has been standing with the city and the residents of Sderot for over 20 years, and we will continue to stand with them now as they rebuild their lives. Well, there you have it, friends. There are 3 things that you now know about Israel. Join me next week, same place, same time, with more updates of what's happening in the Holy Land. Shalom.
The IDF pullout is nearly complete in southern Lebanon. By the end of the day, the army is expected to be fully withdrawn back to the Israeli border, with the exceptions of 5 strategic outposts north of the border. We have more from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
It's not part of the ceasefire agreement, but Israel will remain in 5 outposts under U.S. authorization until it's determined that the threats to Israel have been removed. The U.S. is in charge of the Lebanon ceasefire implementation. It's unclear how long the IDF will maintain the outposts inside Lebanon. Before the pullout, the IDF carried out intensive activity, removing any last threats in areas up to 8 kilometers inside Lebanon. The army beefed up defenses on the Israeli side of the border ahead of tomorrow's ceasefire deadline. The ramped-up defenses include manned outposts in front of each Israeli community, better surveillance capabilities, and triple the number of troops compared to the start of the war. Israel has also made clear that the IDF will continue to operate north of the border to confront any and all threats to Israeli security. Under the U.S. brokered ceasefire, IDF troops were given 60 days to withdraw from South Lebanon after occupying the territories in a ground operation back in early October. Hezbollah operatives must now be completely out of South Lebanon and north of the Litani River. The original deadline was extended from January 26th to February 18th. The Hezbollah chief demanded a full Israeli withdrawal, including the outposts, but he did not include a threat.
يجب أن تنسحب إسرائيل في 18 شباط بالكامل. ما إلى ذريعة